Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Yesterday during my live stream, we talked about what happened with Michigan state legislators and their letter demanding stimulus, which was really ironic because it was a really interesting Trojan horse. And it's also very good for everyone because the reality is society needs more stimulus. Whether you're rich or poor, society as a whole could benefit from more stimulus, rental relief, state and local government relief, and so on and so forth. However, there were some questions about whether or not this letter that we talked about was real or not. And so we're going to review that right now. Did Michigan's leaders actually talk about stimulus with Donald Trump, or was this letter fake? Well, Donald Trump himself just responded to this letter. And in this video, we're going to clear the air about what's actually going on in Michigan and what this has to do with stimulus negotiations. We'll also cover the latest breaking news from Michigan that just came out within the last hour. But when it comes to politics, it's very important for me to say that this channel is focused on money and what politics means for our money. It's pretty unique on this space in YouTube. My goal is to provide as unbiased as information as possible, but sometimes topics I cover are stressful. So as compensation, you can get 4 free stocks with Webull. Deposit $100 and get up to $1,600 in free stocks with Webull. And you can also get life insurance in as little as 5 minutes. You can Apple Pay or Android Pay for it, so you don't even have to talk to anyone. It's kind of cool. Get your life insurance. All right. Let's get started. So, in case you haven't seen the prior videos on this, let me catch you up with a synopsis of what the heck is going on. Trump needs Michigan to flip back to his favor to win the election. Biden currently leads Trump by about 155,000 votes. Additionally, on Wednesday, Trump invited a group of Republican state legislators from the state of Michigan to the White House on Friday for a meeting on Friday. This occurred just one business day prior to the date Michigan is scheduled to certify the national election results, which is supposed to occur on Monday. We get an update on that though, so stay tuned. Now, obviously, the optics of this are such that Trump invited these legislators in an attempt to delay the certification of Michigan's election results. Also, sort of reiterates that and sort of a good reminder here, if the election doesn't get certified on Monday in Michigan, state legislators may be able to use a loophole in the law that allows state legislators to appoint their own electors, which could throw the state of Michigan to Trump, regardless of how votes actually landed. Hence, Trump is likely talking to these state legislators, and inviting them to the White House to see what options he has. But instead about talking about the election, the state legislators from Michigan Trojan horse Donald Trump, using the meeting as an opportunity to basically beg for state and local government funding and stimulus relief for the state of Michigan, which really helps all of Americans, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, because the reality is we need more people at the White House and within Congress and throughout our governments talking about stimulus support, because that's what our government needs. So here's a quick look at the letter, and then we're going to break down what Donald Trump said in response to this. Okay, so we're going to pull up the letter here. Here we go. So here's the letter. And just the highlights from it. I'm not going to go through all of this again because we touched on that yesterday. Months ago, Michigan received funds. This is what they talked about, what they said they talked about. Months ago, we received funding from the CARES Act, and we used that funding to support frontline workers, improve testing, ensure adequate PPE, provide additional support for unemployed and businesses, and so on and so forth. And basically, they said, hey, look, we need more of that, and we'll spend that money responsibly. They also said, we have not yet been made aware of information that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan. And as legislative leaders, we will follow the law. So basically, we got this letter where, these Republican leaders from Michigan are saying, look, we need more stimulus money, and we can't say that we've seen any election fraud yet in Michigan. Obviously, this came across as a bit of almost like a slap in the face to Trump because he invited them there to talk about the election and they talked about stimulus instead. This led to a lot of people suggesting like, hey, wait a minute, was this stuff fake? Like, is this even a real letter? Well, let's go ahead and look at exactly what Donald Trump just said this morning, and it's going to give us a little bit more insight into what's going on. So Donald Trump tweeted just this morning this here. He said, "This is true, but much different than reported by the media. We will show massive and unprecedented fraud." So Trump is doing two things here. He's actually saying, yes, this letter is true. The letter is happened. What they talked about is true. So the letter we talked about yesterday is a real letter. Trump literally retweeted the statement from Senator Mike Shirkey. So we've got the fact that Trump reiterates this letter is true. Now, there are two parts to this. Part number one is, yes, that's good for stimulus. It's good for stimulus because it means Trump is reiterating that they did talk about stimulus. They've talked about state and local government relief, and Trump is evidencing this. On the other side, though, it also gives us this information that Trump is saying, hey, what's different in the mainstream media, though, and that's different from what we're talking about, the mainstream media is saying, hey, in this letter right here, where we have not been yet made aware of any information or allegations regarding fraud, that's this part right here, Trump is saying, hey, the media is going crazy for that line right there, but fear not, we've got the fraud allegations and the fraud evidences and everything is coming. All that's coming. So we've kind of got two things that Trump is telling us here. One, yeah, we talked about stimulus, and two, evidence of fraud is still coming. And so this is where Donald Trump reiterates yet again. He actually tweeted this letter twice. And in the second one, he says massive voter fraud will be shown. So this gives us a bit more insight into, well, the legitimacy of this letter and what we can sort of expect is coming from Donald Trump. But there's also some more breaking news regarding this. So again, not only does this Trump tweet legitimize what's going on, it means, yeah, we're talking about stimulus as well, but it also tells us, well, it kills two birds with one stone, as I like to say. You know, you've got the stimulus going on, and you've got Donald Trump reiterating that, hey, the fraud evidence is coming. But we also have some new breaking news, and that's that the RNC, led by Ronna McDaniel, is now requesting that the certification of votes that's due on Monday get delayed by 14 days to investigate irregularities or fraud found in Wayne County. So let's pull up her letter. Lots of letters to look at today. So this is Ronna McDaniel's letter right here. And in this, Ronna McDaniel is demanding, or I should say requesting, that the Board of State Canvassers in Michigan delay the certification of the election results on Monday for 14 days to allow for a full audit and investigation into abnormalities and irregularities before certifying the 2020 election. Now, I read this entire letter here, and what they give as a precedent is they give a precedent that says, look, Georgia delayed and they did a by hand audit. We should do that as well. It's important to know, though, that Georgia, did end up certifying the election for Biden, and they only ended up giving Trump an extra 450 votes when they did their audit. There was still a difference of about 12,000 votes in Georgia. So in all of Ronna McDaniel's letter, there really isn't any information that says, hey, here's the fraud, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. All she's really saying is, look, don't ignore these potential issues, don't brush them under the rug, give us another 14 days, and let's investigate what's actually going on. All right, so this gives us even more clarity now on what's going on. Is basically, meeting with the state legislators didn't work. They ended up talking about stimulus instead of talking about election fraud, because the state legislators said, well, we're not seeing any election fraud, so we don't have any election fraud to talk about. Now the Republican National Convention is coming out and saying, hey, well, why don't we just delay things for 14 days and then we'll have more time to investigate fraud and bring the evidence. Donald Trump is reiterating, saying, yeah, that's right, let's do that. We did talk about stimulus, but yeah, in the meantime, don't worry, the evidence of the fraud, it's coming, it's coming. This also comes on top of the fact that we've got this sort of additional drama going on, and this kind of partially led people to wonder, like, wait a minute, was that letter like totally fake from those state legislators? There are basically these tweets circulating that show the representatives from Michigan drinking Dom Perignon, which I wrote a little note that instead of paying $500 for a bottle of Dom, you could get it at Costco for like $120. But anyway, there are these pictures circulating of these individuals at a Trump hotel. And so this is kind of leading people to wonder, like, wait a minute, like, this is all so confusing. Now, this kind of breaks everything down in detail for us. There's a lot more drama going on. You know, some are saying, you've got Democrats saying, hey, you can't delay the certification by 14 days. Rashida Tlaib came out and said, look, there's no legal basis to delay the certification. Then you've got other people like the Michigan Attorney General exploring whether or not there are crimes committed by people for meeting with Donald Trump, because these Republican state leaders are meeting with Donald Trump, and like, is that a crime? You know, like, there's so much of this extreme fighting. A lot of that extreme stuff, I don't think means much of anything. Like, I don't think people are going to go to jail. You know, some of these things are a little extreme. Instead, what are the actual bottom lines? Like, what does this actually mean for us? So the bottom lines are, we might have to wait another 14 days to hear of a certification in Michigan for the election. Possibly. We still do not have actual provided evidence of fraud in Michigan. Now, there are affidavits, right? And affidavits are very, very different. It's important to know that. In fact, the two Republicans who certified the election in Michigan, they are now interested in potentially withdrawing their certification in Wayne County. So you've got Palmer and Hartman drew outrage when they initially voted not to certify the election results. Then they voted to certify the election results. And now they're saying they would be willing to basically undo their certification. So saying Wednesday, they want to rescind their votes to certify the county's election results. And now they're suggesting that they only certified the election results because they were threatened, or that people were threatening to harm them or injure them. And that's why they ended up certifying the election results. It shows how much of a mess this all is. But something that's very, very important, affidavits are generally not an example of fraud. Affidavits are just somebody saying, hey, I swear that I believe this happened. We still need evidence to prove that. And if we go back to a prior case just a couple weeks ago, a very, very popular postal service, this story went viral. We had the postal service worker in Pennsylvania saying, hey, I'm swearing to an affidavit that there was fraud in Pennsylvania. I saw the supervisor say, hey, we're going to backdate the postmark on all of these ballots to the 3rd, so that way they get counted as being on time, even though they came on the 4th. Well, when the Justice Department sat down and interviewed that person, I'm going to give you the bottom line here, but my guess what happened in the meantime is, my guess is those Justice Department officials sat down and said, look, you're swearing on something here that if evidence shows you're wrong about what you're saying and you're swearing to it in an affidavit, you could be penalized with perjury, which is fraud. Like that's a mandatory jail sentence. That's bad, right? Fraud could be like a year plus in prison. So that affidavit ended up getting recanted in that Pennsylvania post office because, again, my guess, the person's like, oh crap, like you can't just sign a piece of paper without evidence. It's hard to do that. And I say it happens all the time. Look, affidavits are done all the time. But the point is, what we actually need is real evidence. Republicans say, hey, that's fine. Let's wait. Let's get 2 more weeks of time to get that real evidence in Wayne County for Michigan. Democrats say, no, we don't want to wait 2 more weeks. Honestly, you can kind of see the split here. And remember what The Economist says. The Economist says that 76% of Republicans think President Trump should not concede, that we should keep investigating and figuring out what's going on. The Economist also says that 6% of Democrats say Trump should not concede. In other words, 94% of Democrats are like, concede already. So you can see this is like perfectly along party lines. So that's what's going on in Michigan. So yes, the Trojan horse did actually happen. The Trojan horse letter is real. Now, regarding stimulus again, there are also comments that came yesterday saying, but Kevin, the letter has to be fake because Republicans don't want state and local government funding. So literally, when we talked about this letter yesterday, there were people leaving comments saying, Kevin, that letter is fugazi, you're fake news, that's wrong, because Republicans don't want state and local government funding. This is not true. Obviously, we've now certified that this letter is true. Trump retweeted it twice. Trump is retweeting it. But beyond that, let's talk about exactly that when it comes to stimulus. The answer here is simple. Every state needs more money. States are in the hole by about $300 billion collectively. That is, you take all of the United States and add it together, you get states that are in the hole by about $300 billion. So the question right now isn't whether or not to send state and local government money to the state and local governments. It's how much to send them. Republicans, led by Leader McConnell, and are very pro sending around $250 to $300 billion for state and local government funding. We had Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, explain this to us in detail a couple months ago by now. And he said, look, we've done all of our math. We've looked at every single state, and we believe that state and local governments, so states like California, states like Texas, states like Florida, and the cities within them are in the hole by about $250 to $300 billion. So Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are okay with doing a state and local government bailout, essentially, of $250 to $300 billion. However, where this gets politicized in the news is the fact that you got Nancy Pelosi going, well, we want $417 billion, which is an extra $117 billion. Republicans are like, what are you talking about? The bill is only $300 billion, most at the biggest case scenario. We're not going to give you an extra $117 billion for your Democratic blue state bailout slush fund. Those are put together quotes, obviously, from Republicans. Democrats are like, it's not for a slush fund. It's because we're still in the freaking pandemic and we need money to spend going forward. Otherwise, we're just going to be in a hole again in 2 months and we're going to be asking you for another bailout again. Republicans to this say, well, fine, then ask us for another bailout then. Like literally, that's what's happening. Okay, so that's where we stand right now. And it's sad because the state and local government funding has been the biggest roadblock to actually getting stimulus done. So personally, I'm optimistic on stimulus happening, mostly because we've had Mitch McConnell, Stephen Mnuchin, Mark Meadows, and Kevin McCarthy from the House, 4 Republicans, meet on Friday to come up with a stimulus strategy. Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell have said they're coming back to the negotiating table. On top of that, we know that we've got a deadline of December 31st to get something done, and we've got 3 weeks left in Congress to actually get something done. Now, will Congress get something done? That's up in the air, but we know what the funding is. We know what the differences are. Obviously, we know that more stimulus talks are happening at the White House. We saw this with the Trojan horse. The Trojan horse was a good thing. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, it doesn't matter here. The Trojan horse was a good thing for the American people and society. So hopefully this entire video clears things up on what's going on in Michigan, what happened with the stimulus Trojan horse, what the heck is going on with this fight over state and local government funding, and where we stand on all of these things combined. Obviously, we'll see how things develop, but that's how the news works. We can only talk about what we know, and then we go forward as new information comes out. If you have not yet watched my video on the Treasury Department's bailout ending and what this means for stimulus, I highly encourage you go watch that right now. It's just the video that I posted right before this. It breaks down exactly what's going on, and it's the reality of what's going on with the Federal Reserve basically getting the rug pulled out from under them with the ending of 5 bailout programs. You get companies like the New York Times, and I like a lot of publications, Wall Street Journal on the right, the New York Times on the left, and so on. I read all of them. The New York Times is freaking out, going like, this is a travesty. This is the worst thing. How could they set up Biden for failure like this? Go watch that video on those 5 programs ending, and you will see a lot more information about what the heck is actually going on. That's the update I've got for us. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming to this live stream. And folks, we'll see you in the next one. Get yours free stocks. Email me for a bundle coupon if you want one at kevin@meetkevin.com. And of course, get your life insurance. I'll link down below. Thanks so much. Bye.